and Joel Hynek are the sons of the late Dr. J. Allen Hynek, an astronomer who worked with the U.S. Air Force investigating UFO cases from the beginning, and the actual person behind the History Channel's new series, Project Blue Book, based on a real project to investigate UFOs from 1952 to 1969. A character based on J. Allen Hynek is the lead character in the series, who began his investigation with the United States Air Force as a skeptic, but by the time Blue Book ended, he was convinced some UFO cases posed a real mystery. Paul Hynek is a Wharton MBA, professor of finance and cryptocurrency at Pepperdine University, and creator of Easy Numbers financial projection software, which has helped thousands of startups raise over $2 billion. Paul is building upon his father's Close Encounters classification system to help experiencers demonstrate the objective reality of their encounters. Joel Hynek experimented with rocketry as he grew up, and he enjoyed the visual effects he could produce, which later led to him working on over 30 films since 1980. Joel has worked with some elite names in the industry, such as Doug Trumbull, James Cameron, and others. Joel has helped to bring some incredible special effects to life and has been both a nominee and a winner of more than a few Oscars for his work. Joel studied physics at Carnegie Mellon University before graduating from the University of Illinois with a BS in communication as a film major. We're so happy to have these guys here with us today, so please welcome Paul and Joel Hynek.
Hello, everybody. Love being back here in Phoenix. I lived here for 3 years with my parents. Okay, all right. So, before we start, I wanted to do the opening bookmark. Well, first, hello, Jennifer.
Hey, hi.
Long time no see.
Yes.
Okay, so, any of you remember the first days of Dolly image generators? You would get 10 slides. So we put together some of UFOs and mountains, which we thought was appropriate being here in the Valley of the Sun. Our father was born to Czech parents in Chicago and didn't speak English until he went to kindergarten. And he was taken on the roof of the hospital where he was born to see Halley's Comet in 1910, which is a fitting way for an astronomer to come into this world. We've got lots of these images here, but I think given time constraints, we'll just go ahead and start. This image was taken from a black and white photograph. Oh, I'm not supposed to go past here. And I say tripified by Earl Grey Anderson. A friend, well, a core member of MUFON and a dear friend of ours. And it's with great sadness that we no longer have Earl here, but I suspect part of him is here today. There are some fun things, if I can get my slide working here. Apparently, our dad was big at motels and hotels like this. And he's our collective UFO father. Some of you have the shirt. Shane has the shirt on today. That most fashionable of UFO garb. And more. He would have got a big kick out of that. So, born in Chicago, this is our grandfather and our great-grandfather in front of the Hynek cigar store. It's one of these street scenes that you kind of see like the beginning of a movie, and then it comes to life, and you see like the Model Ts driving by. And that little boy there, that's our father.
Don't forget to mention the...
Go ahead.
So there, in these two photographs, there are 3 Joseph Hyneks. And the reason my dad became J. Allen Hynek was, they used to call him Joey to differentiate from the other Josephs, and he hated that. So he went with J. Allen.
Now, my version of that story is that when he went to the University of Chicago, he joined the athletic fraternity. And at the time, he was an equestrian trick rider. And he'd be like the top guy on the pyramid of guys on horses. And what I remember is that he did that because the stable master's daughter was really cute. Now, my version of that story was that he joined the fraternity because they wanted him for his grades, he wanted them for their access, and there were two other guys named Joe. So my version is he switched to Alan because he didn't want to be the third Joey. But Joel says Dad told him that, so we'll go with that.
Right.
So Joel will take over the crystal radio set.
Yeah, my dad was very into radio, and it was like magic to him. And so he grew up when commercial broadcasting was just getting its feet. And so, some of us kids of his absorbed that admiration of radio. And so a couple of us built crystal radio sets and went on to become a ham radio operator. My dad was a ham radio operator, and I became one as well. But then when we were up in, slide please, Canada, our cabin in Canada, my dad loved listening to shortwave radio, particularly if he could tune in Radio Moscow. He just got the biggest kick out of that. And this was the radio that he used there in the cabin. Thank you. Another love of my father's was trains. He couldn't get enough of them, and some of us absorbed that love as well. This is me and my brother Scott up in Canada, in a town called Blind River, near where our cabin was.
I thought somebody was clapping for Blind River.
Oh, amazing. So anyway, this is me climbing up onto that steam engine. I can't believe I was alive when steam engines were still being used. And that's my brother Scott. And then my father, loved to write letters. There's no internet, in those days. And so so the mailing of the letter was almost ceremonial, it seemed. And so this is me mailing a letter, handing it to the mail car of the train going through Blind River. And this is Paul mailing a letter in Boulder, Colorado. Again, a big deal. And so the love of trains, persisted. And we were driving through Albuquerque on the way to Las Cruces, where my dad had an observatory set up to search for supernovas. And it just happened to be that the super chief, the magnificent super chief, was parked there in Albuquerque. So we got the engineers to come down, or he did, and got a picture with the engineers of the super chief. Wow. And another love of my dad's was turtles. He often would get a box turtle and just let it go in the house, and it would turn up or not as the days would go by, and then we would feed it.
And one day we were in our house in Chicago, and one of our cats is howling. So we go look in the kitchen, and there's a box turtle that we had lost 6 months ago, or we thought was gone, that was stuck on top of the cat's food dish and just swimming in the air, much to the cat's chagrin.
Yes. I think my dad admired turtles because they're so self-contained and have, remained more or less unchanged for millions of years. This was another turtle that my brother got from my dad as a present.
He traded his motorcycle to the assistant zookeeper for the tortoise.
Right. Anyway, this tortoise would run around in the house, as you can see. And eventually we got it a proper home. And so then, since my dad was Czech, I'm going to hand this one off to Paul, since he was around when this was happening.
Yeah, so they say that you get a lot of fulfillment in life from doing things that meant something to you as a child. So this is my dad getting all set up to be, and wait for it, the Grand Marshal of the Czech Day Parade in Wilbur, Nebraska. I mean, that's pretty much top of the Czech Boy Mountain. And here he is, sort of the JFK look, but it ended better. And there's our mom in the car. Just imagine, look at the look on his face. You can see the little kid in him with that sheer delight. Little Czech boy, little Joey from Chicago made good.
Okay, yes. Since I was alive when this happened, when Sputnik was launched, our dad was at the time in charge of setting up satellite tracking stations all around the world, and Project Moonwatch, which was, do I go back? Oh, backwards, sorry. Yes, he was also working for the Smithsonian for the International Geophysical Year, part of which he was required to set up 12 satellite tracking stations around the world, as I mentioned. And so Project Moonwatch was set up by civilian volunteers all around the country to try and catch the first satellite that was put up, or any satellite that was going to be put up, hopefully a US satellite. This is Fred Whipple, who was also working there at Smithsonian, working closely together. This, I'm not even sure what this is, but it's Dad talking to somebody about it on a TV show. So one of my clearest memories was when I was 7, when Sputnik went up. Our dad, we were living in this house on Orchard Street in Belmont, Mass, and our dad took the family to this traffic circle to watch Sputnik fly over, which was, I was 7, and it was quite memorable seeing this little dot go across the sky. It was both exhilarating and kind of frustrating because, we wanted to get one up there first. But in this house, as it turned out, there was someone living on the 3rd floor.
Press the button.
Press the this button?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Yes. The Maharishi Mahesh Yoga, who was also the one who inspired the Beatles. But my dad really loved this. I mean, he sort of came with the house. We were renting it, and he was there on the 3rd floor.
The Maharishi Mahesh Yogi just came with a house.
Yes. But we took full advantage of that, going up and meditating with him. I remember going up and giving him a banana, and he gave me a mantra, and that was.
And the way I heard about this was we were doing a Zoom call with our siblings, and they brought up Google Maps and showed the house. And our brother Scott said, "Hey, Paul, you know what's in that room up there? Or who lived in that room?" I'm like, "No." He said, "The Maharishi Mahesh Yogi." I said, "How come I never knew this?" Yes, it's because you weren't around yet. So the launching of Sputnik, of course, is a big deal. And Life magazine wanted to cover the story. So this is Dad, Fred Whipple, and I'm not sure who the other gentleman is. But this was shot by the Life magazine photographer, but this is the one that they actually used. And this was, of course, shortly after Sputnik, but what they're looking at on the floor there are printouts of what satellites were currently in orbit. And at first, I remember Dad bringing home these little short sheets, and there might be 6 satellites, and then but before long, in the next few months, it just expanded to like hundreds. Paul, you take this one. So he was a director at the Harvard-Smithsonian Astrophysical Research Center, and that job is now headed up by Avi Loeb, which is kind of fun, of Oumuamua fame. And our father worked on the proximity fuse in World War II. So for MUFON audiences and people that we talk to a lot, he's sort of a UFO guy. For us, he was Joey, the Czech boy from Chicago, but an astronomer. And UFOs were kind of a side hustle. But he loved science. And he really wanted to inculcate in us the wonder of science, the scientific method, how to look at the universe, the beauty of the science in the universe. And on our parents' honeymoon, they went to Washington. This during World War II, said, how can I help? So he wound up working at Johns Hopkins in the Applied Physics Laboratory to help collect the technical reports for the proximity fuse, which is thought to be one of the major technical breakthroughs in World War II, which helped stop the V-1 bombs over London. And I think our younger brother Ross still has one of these.
He does.
Oh, so I'll set this up for Joel. So the 12 observatories that went around the world, one was in Iran, and we'll show pictures from Iran, but Walt Disney wanted to have one of these observatories because he liked science, and this was super cool. So long before I was born, the family went to Disney. And our mom didn't like Disney because she thought in Disney movies, the parents were either evil or absent. But Walt Disney asked our father to go there to talk about setting up one of the observatories there.
Right. And we were traveling all the time with Dad, but in this particular case at Disney, after getting a thorough tour of the place, enjoying it, my dad said to Walt Disney, well, sorry, it's the wrong latitude, can't put it here, which he of course could have said over the phone much earlier. But it was sort of tradition for our dad to take us places, particularly on our 10th birthday. He would take us someplace. I think for Paul.
Detroit.
Paul went to Detroit.
Sorry, is anybody here from Michigan? Detroit's a fine city.
But the whole point of that trip was that it was on a 747, which is one of the first flights, and it was making a first stop in Detroit. So Paul got to go to Detroit. Paul then, however, got to go to the Johnson Space Flight Center.
Yeah.
Where here he is.
Calling in some important instructions.
Right, listening in stereo to what they have to say. And then, but I when I was 10, got to go to New York, but not by plane, by train, which of course my dad loved. And this was a flight, my first airplane flight with my dad to the Huntsville Space Center to visit Wernher von Braun. I didn't meet Wernher von Braun, but my dad did. And it was amazing being there because they were testing one of these Saturn V rocket engines. So a quarter mile away, this thing is horizontal, and they fire it off, and the ground is shaking. It was so powerful.
And a quick note about Wernher von Braun. If you saw the TV show Project Blue Book, Wernher von Braun is in there, and he makes kind of like a dimensional skipping device, which is a really cool plot thread, and it wasn't picked up later. So I asked the producer, hey, how come we didn't do anything with the Wernher von Braun? And he said, because the actor was an asshole, so we didn't want to bring him back.
But also he was introducing this whole thing of teleportation, which not real, not really credible. So I'm glad they ditched him. So the Lindheimer Astronomical Research Center was something that my dad had built at Northwestern from funds from the Lindheimer family, and he didn't quite agree with the idea of putting this fancy telescope in Chicago where there was all this city light, but the Lindheimers said, sorry, if you don't give us money, if you don't put the observatory here, we're going to give it to the sports department. And so my dad said, okay. But he really wanted to put it in New Mexico where the skies were very clear.
And my memory of that observatory was when they were building it. And it was at Northwestern on a landfill on Lake Michigan. And there's these great big dirt mounds. And my little brother Ross and I used to use Charleston Chew candy bars to bribe Joel and his friend, who had a Saab with a roll bar, to drive up those dirt mounds in the car.
Fun times. So Dad, of course, loved to educate, and this is him demonstrating the mechanics of the solar system. But he also got invited to speak at the United Nations on behalf of Grenada, and they wanted to establish a UFO investigating unit and an information gathering, archiving unit. So he spoke about that, and his main point there was that the UFO phenomena was intelligently guided, which is what he told them. I don't know if they ever did do that. Paul, do you know? The United Nations develop a UFO information gathering center?
Don't know.
So here he is at the United Nations. And
This is our father in his native habitat, a rare sighting.
right, here he is cleaning the lens of the telescope at Dearborn Observatory at Northwestern. This was before the Lindheimer Astronomical Research Observatory was created. And Dad with Galileo's telescope.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure had profound meaning for him. Dad traveling, I think this was from
Yeah, scientists are cool.
that's right.
The hip cat.
And being an astronomer, one of my dad's favorite things to see was an eclipse. And they were trying to, in 1954, figure out the exact size of the Earth. And they worked out a scheme by having multiple sightings of the same eclipse tell them that. And this is him in 1954 on the way to Iran, a place called Bandar Shah, where they were going to set up and film the eclipse. This is, of course, on the way to Bandar Shah, and of course it's a train, and so my dad is lovingly taking photos of it. This was the train car of the Eclipse expedition in Iran. And this was the Shah of Iran's brother's train car. And this is the Shah of Iran. Sorry for the bad exposure, but he met them. He had to meet the Shah on the way to Bandar Shah. This is at Bandar Shah, and the gentleman my dad is talking to here didn't believe the eclipse would happen. He did not believe that the moon could actually get in front of the sun, and so he bet my dad $10,000 that it would not happen. But unfortunately, it was cloudy, and so they were not able to resolve the bet. Damn. This is our dad. He headed up an expedition, an Eclipse expedition, another one, to Moose River Crossing in northern Ontario. And I went along on that one. This is a photo of the eclipse that I took with my dad's stereo camera, very wide lens. And then following in his footsteps, the Hynek family went to Clarksville, Texas, where they had a recent eclipse last year.
How many of you in totality, saw the eclipse last year? Really? Okay. Thereabouts, yeah. But yeah, eclipses are a big deal in our family. So we went to our brother Ross's house in Dallas, and then had a caravan with two young kids, and we drove 3 hours. And Joel and I were checking 3 different weather services every 5 minutes, because you'd expect Texas to be sunny, and where our brother was in Maine to maybe be dicey. It was the other way around. So it was really doubtful whether we'd be able to see that eclipse or not.
But the place that we've seen that had the least worst weather forecast was Clarksville Airport in Clarksville, Texas. And this is a little clip from that event, which should play. Thank you, Paul. So yes, this is just a shorter version of this video. I have my drone up there, which I hope to see the shadow approach.
Only happened
And this is the beginning of it, approaching totality. Drone shot. Whoa! Oh my God!
Man, this timing is working out perfect.
Oh my God!
That's Joel. So dark now. Oh my God! Look at it! Look at it, people! Oh my God!
Oh my God, there's not. Look.
Whoa! Oh boy!
Oh, look at that! Oh my God!
Oh, where'd it go? Oh, wow!
And our good friend Thomas Jane, who's an actor, who's also an experiencer, who spoke at Contact in the Desert last week, came with us. And Joel had his drone in the air, and Thomas inadvertently bumped into the table that had the drone controller. So when the Eclipse is done and Joel's trying to get the drone back, at first it wouldn't respond. So we thought maybe we'd lost it. Then he returned home a couple times, finally came back. And because Thomas is in Hollywood business, the drone went up to the perfect height and did a slow panoramic turn all around the horizon at the exact moment of the eclipse. So it couldn't have been programmed any better.
Yes, it's that.
That's some good eclipse juju.
Yes.
But the next big solar eclipse is in 2027. And I can't tell you how much being in the path of totality of an eclipse can really impact you. It's phenomenal. And there's going to be one in 2026, which is already next year. But in 2027, it's going to be seen in totality above Luxor, Egypt, which is kind of a twofer, right? And you'd expect it to be sunny there, and it's going to be 6.5 minutes of totality, which is exceptionally long. So please consider doing that. And even if you want to, I think a lot of us in here are the UFO people in our families, and we have other folks that we bring. It might be the same with an eclipse. A lot of people might say, oh, what's the big deal about an eclipse? But even people who don't care at all about astronomy or science, they can't help being impacted by the eclipse. And in Egypt, for 6.5 minutes at Luxor, that's just a really wonderful opportunity. So in 1973, when I was 11 years old, our father told us that, hey, we're going to Africa. Oh, that's super cool. And he said, there's an eclipse, and the best place in the world is right off the west coast of Africa. So we're going on a 2-week cruise, and we're going for free because he's speaking. And he said, we're going to share all of our meals for 2 weeks with one other family. And it was Neil Armstrong and his family. Now, I'm an 11-year-old boy, son of an astronomer. There's nobody in the world I'd rather meet than Neil Armstrong. And it was wonderful. For 2 weeks, we got to have all of our meals with him and talk with him. I got to be friends with his sons. And it was just one of the most monumentally cool things in the world. Neil deGrasse Tyson was on the ship, lots of astronauts. Isaac Asimov, old mutton chops, was there. And like a 20-year-old woman asked him for his autograph. He had a Sharpie at the ready, and he wrote on her thigh, Isaac Asimov was here. Now, what's interesting was, I never really thought much about how that happened, but this article came out in The Sun, I think in 2019, that it was Neil Armstrong, who really had his pick of the litter, who asked to sit with our family. Now, my father had bona fide, he was a bona fide astronomer, but it's true, Neil was interested in UFOs. And he and our father talked about setting up a new research institute about UFOs. He didn't go through because Neil is not, he's kind of reclusive, and back in the 70s still, there was a lot of stigma attached to the phenomena. But I don't know exactly what he told my dad in hushed tones while my brothers and I are eating dessert and all that. But that's the fact, that he wanted to be with my father and wanted to set up a UFO research institute. And to me, those kind of things are sometimes the most compelling, more than this or that case. And sometimes you read between the lines of what the government says. Here's my mom on the ship, and luckily it was completely sunny, which is, you always have that sort of cosmological sword of Damocles hanging over you, whether it will be sunny or not. Here's our stateroom, my dad getting his camera ready. My dad was a wonderful photographer, and he had this stereoscopic camera that would take those slides, and you put the little viewer, and you can see stereo pictures. He took thousands of these around the world of the family, and he had great sense of composition, like a branch in the foreground and the cable car and American Samoa in the background. And I'm sort of the document archivist for the family, and Joel, not surprisingly, is the image archivist. And Joel has digitized a lot of these, but we lost a lot of these because unfortunately Joel's house burned down in a big fire in LA in 2018. So we lost a lot of these, but luckily Joel was able to digitize a bunch of them. But that's really one of our biggest family treasures. And I was collecting autographs, and so Neil Armstrong, Isaac Asimov, etc. And I got Neil to do one for the gang in the Hynek neighborhood. So I had bragging rights for quite some time. And Neil was very interested in UFOs. But you guys have probably heard the phrase invisible college. So there was something, from the Middle Ages, but Jacques and my father brought that back because they knew so many people, scientists, professors, that were interested in the phenomena but weren't comfortable admitting so publicly. So this is part of correspondence between Arthur C. Clarke and my father. And so Arthur C. Clarke is saying, I'm very interested in your letter to science. I have been shooting down flying saucers for years, but I'm impressed by your arguments. Right? And then, so my dad says, it is only the astounding persistence of the phenomena of reports from ostensibly reliable people and on the global basis that has caused me to urge at this rather late date that more serious attention be paid to the phenomena. He was the arbiter of the noise level, and that's all he wanted. He was not a believer. Scientists don't traffic with the word belief. There's evidence, and you weigh the evidence. And the evidence over time became convincing that there is a phenomenon. Doesn't mean it's extraterrestrial. It could be interdimensional, etc. But you don't need an answer to accept the data. And I think that illustrates a great saying that there are two kinds of people in the world. Those who are okay with questions they cannot answer, and those who are not okay with their answers being questioned. Right? And that creates a really good, distinct intellectual fault line between those two camps. And I dare say that most of us who are interested in the UFO phenomena are okay not having all of our answers questioned. Because the more we learn, the more friggin' mysterious it can get. And I think we need to keep our minds open. And that's something our dad liked to tell us, that keep your minds open. Even if there's a phenomena that goes against the grant you're working on, the book you wrote, that evidence is there. But once you accept the idea that there may be a phenomena, don't rush to grab the best available answer and shove that in. And sometimes that's even harder than admitting something's going on here. I found a lot of people can't really accept the UFO phenomena because they say, I don't know where they come from, or I don't know why they dress like that, or I don't know why they do crop circles. You don't need to know the why to admit the what. So here's Dad going back and forth, Arthur C. Clarke. I do appreciate you writing, and should you be the recipient in the future of UFO reports containing considerably more information bits, he's a scientist, I will greatly appreciate your sending them on to me. Now, Okay, so there's more of that. And at this time, Arthur C. Clarke was telling my dad, hey, I got a new movie coming out called 2001. Just super cool. And we had a lot of these. We had a lot of folks come to the house. I'll show you some slides of that, but I remember Dick Gregory coming. And it was so fascinating because he was sort of a different circle than my father's scientific circle. But also, I want to mention at Contact in the Desert last week, my friend Stephen Finley spoke. African-American professor at Louisiana State University, who talks about the Nation of Islam essentially being, he doesn't like the word cult, but a UFO belief system. Because central to their beliefs is Ezekiel's wheel. It's a fascinating new way to look at it. Joel.
Okay. This image here is of the moon landing, Neil Armstrong setting foot on the moon, but this little battery-powered TV was in our cabin in Canada on Lake Deborn. I was, as I mentioned, a ham radio operator, and I had set up an antenna on the mountain behind us, and then with a thing called a ladder line, wires coming down to the cabin. I wasn't there at the time, but my dad used that to get a television signal from the United States, and had everybody come over to the house, to the cabin, to view that. I was in Prague at the time, but couldn't be there.
I was in the cabin. I was 7 years old, and we had 50 people in our cabin. This is a cabin. There's no road. You take a boat. There's no running water, no electricity, and we had a battery-powered TV. And I remember it because I was in my parents' bedroom on the porta potty, and my dad dragged me off of there. So I knew it was important.
Surefire way to know. This is the cabin at night. Kerosene lanterns. And my dad on the front porch of the cabin working. And here's the whole family up there. And going from right to left is brother Scott, my sister Roxanne. It's me in the middle there. And then little Paul and little Ross on the left.
And that day, all 5 of us swam across the lake. And one of us is the worst swimmer of the bunch. And I distinctly remember I was going to drown before I give up. And Joel is in the boat giving me encouraging words. And I just will not come out of that lake and be the only one that couldn't swim across the lake.
But the reason we were swimming across the lake was we had a rule that you had to wear your life preserver in the boat unless you could swim across the lake. So this was very important to Paul.
And my little brother Ross was a great swimmer, and he'd already done it. So it was just, at the time, horrible, and then glorious that I was able to do it. And they were very kind and very patient with me.
Indeed we were, but he made it. This is the dock in Canada and the boathouse. If you take a closer look, you can see on the back of it painted a image of my dad.
So this place was so special to our father. There are a lot of universities that have purchased land so the professors and faculty and staff can go there in the summer. So this was through Ohio Wesleyan. So we go up there almost every summer of our lives, and some of our relatives are there right now. And it was our father's getaway that I think was one of his happiest places in the world.
Definitely. Beautiful clear skies there. So this is a photo of the family at the time. So it's me, Scott, his wife at the time, Susan, Roxanne, Mimi, Dad, and then Paul, and Scott's oldest daughter, Jennifer, and Ross. You might ask, well, who took this photograph? Actually, it was a composite photograph. Part of it was taken by Dad, and part of it was taken by Mom, and I put them together. So there was, with good old Photoshop, so there was a constant stream of people coming through the family house. My mother loved to entertain, and Dad loved to talk to these interesting people. And so often, we always had a family formal dinner, whether there were guests or not. But so often I would come up from the basement where I had a workshop and was my bedroom, and find somebody at the table, and Mimi would call up to the third floor, say, Alan, come down now, and he'd come down, and then we would yak and have a good old time. So this
Got to say something about his room in the basement. Joel is a brilliant electrical engineer, and he had all kinds of things in his room. He had a Jacob's ladder. You know, he had those two metal rods, and the bolt, the electricity goes up. But he also, on his door, made a combination lock with a big bolt that would close it, because he had dangerous things in there. He didn't want his bratty little brothers to get in there. But that wasn't enough. He also made it so the door would open magically and then lock and shut behind him. So he would come home, and Ross and I would just say, hey, Joel, let's wrestle. And we're grabbing onto him, and he's the best big brother in the world. And he would wrestle with us, and he's like, finally, get away from me, you little monkeys. And he would run downstairs with us in hot pursuit. He'd run downstairs, the door, always locked, would open as if by magic. He'd run in there, and the door would shut, and we hear him in there going, ha, ha, ha. And we're like, okay, we got to figure this out. And this is before remote controls. So one day when Joel was gone, like, we got to figure this out. And we see all these wires on the ceiling in the basement, and we think, there's got to be a button somewhere. I don't know. Where is it? I don't know. And we said, well, when he goes down the staircase, he grabs on the ledge. Well, that's because he's big enough, he can do that, and therefore bypass the last 5 steps. But he does it every time. Okay, well, you lift me up. No, you lift me up. So Ross lifts me up. When Joel's gone, I'm like, I think I found it. Hit the button. The door opens up. Okay. So it was all we could do to get it back in place and just pretend that we didn't know. So, hey, Joel, let's wrestle. Oh, get off, you little monkeys. He runs downstairs, and we're like, sauntering down, no big hurry. And then we press the button, and the door opens, and we go running, and Joel's like, oh, best day of our lives.
Oh gosh, and you can see there's Paul hamming it up. This is Paul's birthday. This at the family
Not too late for
dinner
presents.
table. Oh no, this is Paul's birthday. Probably both. Almost all of these photos were taken by Dad with his stereo camera. And so a constant stream of visitors, as I mentioned, coming through the place, and one of them was Jacques Vallée. He was there quite often. This is some interview going on
Look at that hair Joel has.
at the time. Not uncommon, TV crews. This is a TV crew, nothing to do with our dad. That's younger brother Ross. We had dug a bunch of holes in the backyard and discovered a bunch of old bottles and tools, and so they were somehow the local TV station was interested in that, and they came to interview Ross.
Yeah, Ross and me. So what happens, the TV stations would be there all the time, and they started seeing some strange implements we had, these old things that we dug up in the backyard, and we'll show a picture of that. And they asked us what's going on, and we said, well, Ross and I do this digging in the backyard. And they thought that was interesting. So the first time we were ever on TV had nothing to do with our dad, and it was going the opposite direction than where he went.
That's right. But now this is Paul here. He, holding his own with this guy who worked at Dearborn Observatory. Paul, as you probably have noticed, has the gift of gab more than any other of the siblings, and which I admire very much. Another visitor at the family dinner table was Hector Quintanilla, who was the administrator in charge of Project Blue Book. And he was one of the guys who was always pounding on my dad, just identify these cases, just identify them. We don't care about, anything scientific. And so he was a bad name. Quintanilla was a bad name in our house. But you might ask, well, why did Dad stick with this? It's because he wanted access to the files, which he was always copying and then bringing home. And he would often tell us the story of Tycho Brahe, who was I think a 16th century astronomer who was very good at recording the data of the motion of the planets. But he had no idea how to interpret it until Johann Kepler came along and worked out the laws of planetary motion. So my dad sort of felt that he was Tycho Brahe, gathering all this data in hopes that he or other people would figure out what the UFO phenomenon was.
And we would do a disservice to our father if we did not tell the pun that he would like to tell around this.
Oh.
So, and this is a true story. Tycho Brahe was a character. He had his nose sliced off in a duel. So he had these different metal nose pieces that he had put on there, silver for during the day and copper for weekends, But he was a big drinker. And so the Holy Roman Emperor came to check out his astronomical investment. And Tycho Brahe's at the dinner drinking a lot of beer. He had to go to the bathroom, but apparently you don't just excuse yourself to go to the bathroom when the Holy Roman Emperor was there. So he just had to sit there, and unfortunately his bladder burst. And he died, which allowed Johannes Kepler access to the data from which, among other things, he formulated his 3 laws of planetary motion. Now this is going to hurt. So my father called this, ready? A great break for science. I told you.
Thank you, Paul. So this is Lieutenant Colonel Robert Friend, who was a predecessor to Mr. Quintanilla, and a firm supporter of Dad. He gave Dad everything he wanted, and was a great guy. And we had the opportunity, as a film crew came to our house, my house in LA.
A week before it burned down.
It's true, yes, a week before it burned down, to interview Robert Friend. And Paul had the pleasure of talking to him like a week before he died, where he confirmed to Paul that he had...
I'll take that.
Okay, very good.
So, Lieutenant Colonel Robert Friend was an American hero. He was a Tuskegee Airman. He worked on the Space Shuttle and Project Blue Book. And he is 99 at this time. And they're interviewing him for some B-reel for Project Blue Book. And they're asking him questions, and you could tell he's kind of fading a little bit, but because he wasn't quite sure, sometimes you could tell like what context people are coming at him from, Tuskegee, Space Shuttle, or Blue Book. But when you asked him sort of a specific question, he would go right back into that sort of checklist mode. And one of the questions they asked him, which I found fascinating, was, Lieutenant Colonel Friend, were alien bodies ever taken to Wright-Patterson? I think an answer we'd all like to know. And he said, no. They wouldn't have been taken to Wright-Pat because that was a mechanical center. They would have been taken to Fort Hood, which was a burn center. So he's not violating an oath. But why is he giving that extra information? And so, as Joel mentioned, I met up with him again on his 99th birthday in Manhattan Beach, California. We're at an outdoor restaurant. And I said, Lieutenant Colonel Friend, I'm just your buddy's son. You can tell me. Now, I know I can't ask him a specific question because he doesn't want to violate his oath. He's a patriot. So I did a general question. But first, I warmed him up with his famous George Burns joke. George Burns was famous for wanting to live to be 100 years old. And he's at a party, and a woman says, but Mr. Burns, who really wants to live to be 100 years old? And George Burns says, someone who is 99. So I told this to Lieutenant Colonel Friend just to lube up the gears. And then I said, you can tell me, I'm just your buddy's friend. Did you ever see something convincing, right? Skirting any violations of disclosure. And he still, this is, 60, 70 years after the fact, he still looks around. And he leans into me, and his eyes open wide, and he says, yes. To me, and I got goosebumps, I still get them now, that's what's convincing. Those types of things. People who are unimpeachable, who were there, have no reason to lie, have a family relationship with, and tell you something like that. And then we were going to go do another film session at his house a couple months later, and then he passed away.
Ah, yes. My dad and I used to, build Heath kits together. And this is a signal tracer. It's great for doing things like tapping into phone lines, and which I did to the family phone line. My dad knew that, and so he would occasionally ask me to record on a reel-to-reel tape recorder interviews that he was going to do over the phone with various people. One of them I remember quite clearly was a woman in Tennessee who sees a bright light coming, hears this hum, and finds herself levitating off the bed, and then it went away. And another one was a car stoppage case that were apparently quite common in those days. Someone's driving down the highway and bright light approaches, and suddenly the car stops and either sits there for a while or more elaborate things happen. But in this case, it just hovered there for a while. Big bright object flew away. Car started up, but I mean, I haven't heard anything about car stoppage cases lately. Have you, Paul?
No, sir.
Okay, thanks. Yes. One time my dad, knowing that I was, knowing something about electrical engineering, gave me some plans that someone had sent him of what could be a propulsion system for a spacecraft. And he said, "What do you think, Joel? Does this thing work?" And I said, looked at it for a while, and I said, "Dad, I think it's going to be, a cosmic spark fest, because the incredibly high voltages that they had indicating, in our atmosphere, it would just be sparks all over the place and would basically be shorting out." And so I had to say, "No, not going to work." And another time, my brother, Paul.
I don't think that's going to appear. Maybe just click again. There we go. So Joel kind of tread lightly over that. Cosmic Spark Fest. That's a phrase only an engineer comes up with on the fly. And I think, if not the title of your autobiography, at least a chapter, Cosmic Spark Fest, I think is awesome. So now, my brothers are engineers. I was a French major. And yeah, it wasn't really a joke, but thanks. So when I was 10 years old, my father and I watched The Time Machine. Okay? And so I said, after the movie, I said, "Hey, Dad, I'm not going to build a time machine." And he starts laughing, kind of like you guys did just now. And that really pissed me off. I said, "Why are you laughing?" He said, well, he could have said, "Because your brothers are pretty good engineers and maybe they could build something you couldn't." He just said, "Well, Bozo." So for Ross and I, the last two kids in the family, he just called us Bozo. He was tired of being angry, saying, "Scott," "No, Dad, try again." "Joel," "No, one more." Just called us Bozo. "Well, Bozo," because it's impossible. I said, "But Dad, when you were a kid, wouldn't they have said that going to the moon was impossible?" And he said, "Okay, Bozo, you're right. You go downstairs and build a time machine because you don't know it's impossible." Like, "Yeah, Dad!" I felt so empowered by Dad. So I go running downstairs, and I got some balsa wood, some duct tape, which you always need for a time machine, and you guys know that. Wires, all these things. I'm like, "This is great." And then it dawned on me, I don't know how to build anything, and I don't have any operating theory of what to build. So I ran outside and played kickball. But I still have that feeling of my father empowering me to do something, and that nothing is impossible if you don't think it is. Yeah. So that's me and my friend TJ, who convinced me to put on my mom's Seinfeld poofy shirt for Halloween, and my mom's big red hat, to strike terror throughout the neighborhood.
Halloween? I didn't think that was for Halloween.
Look at that. Am I buckling the swash right there or not? Yeah, Joel likes these pictures. Okay, so our father was chairman of the Department of Astronomy at Northwestern, and we would have Christmas parties there every year. So you can see my brother Ross with the even better outfit than I have. He's got the little overalls there. Here I am looking at a wooden toad. And toads are very special for me. Maybe I'll get into that later. This is our house in Evanston, Illinois. Now, that's what it looks like now. It did not look like that before. That's what it looked like. So that's Joel in the hole. That's me with the blue and the striped shirt. And our friend, my brother Ross, is on the rope swing, which you can't see behind there. We don't really have much about the rope swing. And I got to tell you, Joel was the best big brother in the world. We had a rope swing in the backyard because he threw a rope from the top of our house to this big, huge tree and then shimmied along to tie the rope from the branch. And this is what, like 40, 50 feet up in the air?
Yeah, third floor.
He could have died. And he's just shimmying along without any harness. And one of our dad's friends comes along and says, "You should be a rigger." This was normal. And so we did so much on that rope swing, all kinds of games for years and years and years. It was just a wonderful thing that Joel created for us. But as Joel mentioned, we used to like to dig holes. So Joel said, well, shovel and all that's not enough. So we jerry-rigged a lawnmower engine to have a pulley, to have buckets, so we could fill them up with dirt in the bottom of the hole and take them out. And our mom was fine with this. She had one rule. If she looked in the hole and couldn't see every body part of every person in the hole, we had to fill in the hole and start another to buy her time.
Yes. Our parents were quite liberal.
Yes, especially for by the time Ross and I came along, they'd already been through everything with Joel. And we'll tell you the kind of adventures that Joel did. So now here is another one. So this is right by our house. And that's Joel rolling a tire.
A wheel.
And you can see a little row of bricks right here launching over us. Now this is kind of in the beta stage. So we only had about 4 or 5 of us. My brother Ross and I are 2 of those. But we got up to 17 people. And once you've done this a couple times, you realize you didn't want to be that 17th person.
You can see the rope there actually hanging a little.
Oh yeah, right here is the rope.
Yeah.
That's how high up Joel clambered from the house. I mean, who does that? He does. And that's me on the rope swing, getting up on a tall ladder and just going. We had a game, what do we call it, Dead Man? No, not.
It was pickup cane.
Well, pickup game, but there's another one where, so this is on top of a little fort we had, and one of the games we had was you had the rope up there and you let it swing.
Oh yeah.
And whoever could let it swing the most times, and then you jump and catch it, you win. Second prize is you just hit face down in the dirt. Okay, so this is Joel building a jet engine in the backyard. That's him right there. Now, you might think that this is fairly remarkable for us. But if you look up here, and I've got a little inset here, there's Joel. Here's me, my little brother Ross, eating his Cheerios, and my mom. None of us looking at the jet engine in the backyard, because this was Tuesday. That's the kind of stuff that Joel did.
I still can't believe that Mom was so relaxed with this, because up there
She's not even looking.
on the balcony, I had a tank of white gas that was coming down, and that fueling those flames there, which was vaporizing the white gas to then fire the pulse jet. But yeah, she was just so calm with it. I couldn't believe it.
Because this was not the most extreme shit he did. He was on the Unabomber short list. And he actually brought to Phoenix in 100-degree temperature a hoodie. Okay? Now, Joel, why were you on the Unabomber short list?
Well, when I was at Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh, the air quality was terrible. Can you click this?
Yep.
Oh yeah, there we go. And so, you know, this was a lot of activism going on, and I was thinking, well, how can we help this problem? I know we have to shut down one of the steel mills. How are we going to do that? Well, we'll have to knock out a power tower. Well, maybe we could put acid drip on the supports, but then we wouldn't know when it was going to fall, and someone might get hurt. No, we have to be in total control of this. Well, how can we do that? I know, we'll blow it up. And so I thought, okay, nitroglycerin, that's the way to do this. And believe it or not, you could find, in those days, you could just go in the World Book Encyclopedia and it would just tell you every step you needed to do.
But how did you get the nitroglycerin?
Yes, had to get concentrated sulfuric and nitric acids, which were not commonly available at your pharmacy. So me and my cousin, Mark Hamilton, we formed a fake company called H&H Electric and just called into one of the chemical suppliers in Chicago that, hey, we need these concentrated acids to clean the television tuner knobs. And
how old were you?
16. No, I was like 20. Something like that. And so, yeah, we got the acids and made nitroglycerin. It was amazing stuff. You just put a little drop, I'll say like on a vise, and hit it with a hammer, and the hammer will fly across the room. One day, though, I had some friends over and said, hey, you want to make some nitroglycerin? Like, sure. So we're in my basement room and had accidentally spilled some of the glycerin on the floor, cleaned it up, put it back in the jar, and then poured it into the little vial of a beaker of the concentrated acids. And the idea is that nitroglycerin would, after putting the glycerin in, would form at the top. And so I'd poured it in, and suddenly it started to bubble and fizz and make vapors, and I think, oh my God, it's going to blow. So one of my friends was asleep on my bed there, but he got the vibe, and instantly we're all trying to run out of the house at the same time.
Leaving my mother and brother and me directly above there, blissfully unaware.
So we run outside, and of course it didn't blow. It was just the dirt from the floor reacting with the acids that caused that.
So Joel did all kinds of bombs. And one day he decides to play around with a remote fuse, electronic. So he puts black powder and a bunch of stuff in jars underground. And he thinks, no, maybe I should put more things on top of there. So like more lawn chairs and things like that.
Yes. My dad had a rule. He said, okay, Joel, you build whatever you want, but you have to show it to me first. So I, of course, showed him the little ones. I never showed him the big ones. And was trying to set this one off with had made one in concrete with a pyro fuse, with a match. A friend of mine, we're driving around in his car, and we're trying to find a safe place to set this off. And we're in an alley, and there's a fence, and it has these interwoven boards. And we go, wow, this is the perfect place to put it. So we put it there. I light the fuse. We drive off, and kaboom, blows up the fence. And then 2 weeks later, had tried to set one off at the canal that went through Evanston, but with an electric detonator. This one was much bigger, but the battery that I had wasn't strong enough. So waited till the next weekend and decided we'd have to set it off with 110 volts from the house. So we dug a big hole, put it in it, and I'm thinking, maybe we better put some more things over this. So we started hauling out sheets of plywood, bookcases, lawn chairs, whatever we could get our hands on, made this big pile, and we all hide behind something, plug it in, and there's this tremendous explosion, and it's like someone hit you in the chest, and look over, and that entire pile of stuff is gone. But raining down from the sky is little
over the
bits,
whole neighborhood.
Yeah, is these bits of wood, and we, of course, being 16, terrified, we hop in my buddy's car and we take off, and people are coming out of their houses, looking around, and so that following Monday, get a knock on the door. It's the detective from the Evanston police, and he said, I got you. And apparently,
he was a known suspect at the time.
Apparently, the house where the fence was an alderman's house, and they thought, oh, this is some political thing going on here. And so anyway, he took away all my chemicals, and that was it. But that's,
But they made Joel go through the neighborhood apologizing to all the neighbors, most of whom said, hey, Joel, that was a really good one.
but yes, but then I also had to, my dad and I had to go to court to, because it was a serious matter, and he was quite upset with me because, I was besmirching the Hynek name. But yeah, so then I had to go around and apologize to everybody. But that's how I presumably ended up on the Unabomber shortlist.
Because the Unabomber, the first bomb was at Northwestern University to a chemistry professor. So,
Well, this is so, growing up with Dad was both exciting and frustrating. And one of the more exciting events was when he would end up on TV. This was one of those moments.
One of these three men is an expert on unidentified flying objects, commonly called flying saucers. What is your name, please?
My name is J. Allen Hynek. My name is J. Allen Hynek. My name is J. Allen Hynek.
Only one of these men is the real J. Allen Hynek. The other two are imposters and will try to fool this panel.
Sure.
Tom Poston, Peggy Cass, Orson Bean, and...
Yeah. So, So exciting and frustrating. One of the frustrating things was, we'd get all excited about hearing some UFO case, and it would turn out to be a hoax. This particular one here is my dad explaining that this picture is actually a chicken incubator and not a flying saucer. And so another frustrating thing was when I had gotten my first job in Chicago, I got a break from that to be on the crew of a documentary called UFOs Past, Present, and Future, directed by Alan Sandler and produced by Bob Emenegger. One of the things we were going to do was go to Holloman Air Force Base, where Emenegger had gotten permission with from the CIA to see either an actual alien spacecraft remains or film of it landing. And so we get to the gate, and they won't let us in. And so Emenegger is on the phone, back to Washington, and they say, sorry, apparently the political winds had changed, and but they let us in anyway, and they just took us to this empty hangar, and that was it. Very frustrating. Yeah, so this is the blurb about how Emenegger had the cooperation of 3 of the intelligence agencies to clear this for us, but fortunately didn't happen. One of the frustrating things was my dad's sort of battle with the scientific establishment. And there's a thing he wrote called temporal provincialism. There's a tendency in the 20th century science to forget that there will be a 21st century science and indeed a 30th century science from which vantage points our knowledge of the universe may appear quite different than it does to us. We suffer perhaps from temporal provincialism, a form of arrogance that has always irritated posterity. This is my dad's saying basically the scientific establishment gets a little smug about what they know. And he told us a story about being at an astronomical conference, and someone there says, hey, there's a UFO right outside. And nobody got up to go to the window to look. It's because, it's just not part of the scientific establishment.
I love that phrase, irritated posterity. So,
About 10 more minutes, we'll take a break. Okay.
we had lots of folks over to the house. And one of the ones I remember distinctly was Father Gill from, I think, the 1959 and 1961 case in Papua New Guinea. And what happened was he was inside for evening prayers, for Vespers. And he hears a commotion outside. He goes outside, and a lot of people are looking up and they see a craft. Now, one of the things about Father Gill that I noticed was he was remarkably intelligent and very present in the experience. And while he's seeing it, he's doing trigonometric calculations to determine the distance and the size. And they're watching it, and then a hatch opens and they see beings come out. Father Gill waves, and they wave back. And it takes off. And there were other sightings, and there were sightings that could help sort of triangulate or map out a flight path. And my father loved this case. And when Father Gill was at our house, he, from New Guinea, he was, an Anglican missionary. And he was in town for some kind of ecumenical religious conference in Chicago. So he wasn't on a book tour. And he came to our house for dinner, because he'd known my father at that point for years. And he didn't launch into his account. That wasn't his style. And I remember watching him, and my father put a lot of stock in the credibility of the witness. And he would talk to us quite a lot about the witness being very important. Our father wasn't trained, he was an astrophysicist. He wasn't trained in soft arts and communication. So imagine being an astrophysicist, and then the Air Force asks you to talk to people, perhaps in the most traumatic part of their lives. He had to develop these skills. And not to interrogate, but to gently question. And he'd be very patient. And with Father Gill, he had known him over the years. And I'm watching him talk to Father Gill, and I'm making my own determination that this is a man who's very intelligent, very comfortable in his skin, with a clear memory that didn't seem to get embellished over the years. And our father would ask questions from slightly different angles to see if there's consistency. And he just, he didn't start talking about it, but if you are fairly well known for having seen a UFO, and you come to the Hynek house for dinner, and we feed you, you're probably going to have to talk about it. And so he did, but very matter-of-factly. And this case really stood out to me, because here's this guy who just oozes sincerity and intelligence. And this was just something that happened. And I don't know if he'd really processed it into his worldview, but it was just this matter-of-fact relating in an ordinary manner of an extraordinary encounter. And of course, Travis Walton came to our house. And Travis is a fixture here in Arizona. Most of you, if not all of you, have met him. Another very convincing witness. This is not something that Travis wanted. Right? And Travis has a successful career. He's been able to sort of process this and integrate it and still live a full life after the traumatic experience. Was it like 5 days or so that he was gone? Yeah. Right? And think of all the ostracism that he has faced, and he's remained steadfast and had a crappy movie about his experience made too. But it's people like this that really stand out to me, and it's not so much the case, it's the people involved that really bring it home. So Calvin Parker, and I want to thank my good friend Alejandro Rojas for putting on the International UFO Congress. And I gave a presentation there, and Karen as well, thank you. Gave a presentation there, and right before I'm going on stage, I'm in this kind of go mode. And this older man and woman start coming up to me. I'm thinking, just let me stay in my mind space. And I hear this, Paul? I said, yes. It's Calvin. Now, I took the phone call in 1973 when Calvin Parker called from Pascagoula. I wanted to go back outside and play. And there's this guy with this long southern drawl who was still traumatized by this incident, trying to talk to my father. And Calvin is just as solid as you get. And one of the hallmarks of the Pascagoula case in 1973 in Mississippi is that more and more witnesses have come forward over the years to add further corroboration to the story. And something that Calvin told me when we were talking right after I talked to the Congress was that, the incident happened on a Friday or over the weekend, and that Monday morning at 7:30 a.m., our father was waiting in the HR office of the shipyard. I didn't know that. And that case, you know, the tape recorder was left on after the police left the room, and clearly these guys aren't actors, and clearly it just seemed to be natural as they're trying to understand this event. It's these things that you know, people say, "What, do you have a favorite case?" And it's not for me so much the events of the case, but it's having met these individuals and seen what it's done to them, seeing how they're struggling to process it, and be consistent over the years. That's what really jumps out at us. I think this is as good a time for a bio break. Yes, Stacy? I get an enthusiastic head nodding. Okay, so we're going to take like a 10, 15-minute break, right? Okay, cool. So intermission. So before we start, thank you very much to Stacy for all of her wonderful hospitality and for organizing Phoenix MUFON. Can we have a hand for Stacy, please? And to Shane and Dennis and Karen and Alejandro and Jennifer and everybody, it's so good to be here in Arizona. Now we're going to continue with our presentation, and so none of us were active speaking in our family, were active speaking about UFOs before about 5, 6 years ago, 7 years ago. We didn't think there was any reason. Who would care to hear us? We were just the children of somebody who had a side hustle of UFOs. But it was the TV show Project Blue Book that kind of activated us. And you'll hear more about this, but Joel and I were consultants on this. And, wow. Well, see?
Paul's idea.
Yeah, for the Unabomber. There we go. That was my idea. He's like, no, Paulie, I don't want to do it. I said, it'll be fun. So years ago, I was asked to speak about AI and UFOs. And I said, okay, I can do that, but I can do you one better. How about instead of me speaking about AI and UFOs, I ask questions of Jacques Vallée, who, as you may or may not know, has a PhD in AI and knows about as much about UFOs as anybody in the world. So we did. And so this is me asking him questions in San Francisco years ago. And I had imposter syndrome, thinking this should be my father. But Jacques, who I've known my whole life, was so gracious and so kind and made me feel welcome. It was such a nice sort of way to break into doing this. And I want you to notice the insert here. Look at Jacques' socks. Jacques is a very serious guy, but he has a sense of humor. I think that's a great quote from Jacques. Right? I mean, he has studied this phenomena from both ends. And like many of us feel that there's consciousness is a key part of it. And that merely or spaceships, it's not just that. Right? Many of us have experienced this fact of communication before, during, and after I won't say the mirror, but the sighting of some kind of craft. You know, our father called his first book The UFO Experience, not the UFO sighting. And that's such an important nuance that MUFOners know full well.
Thank you. So in 1972, as many of you know, our dad wrote this book, The UFO Experience. And one of the things that he also wrote was an ending chapter or epilogue where he staged it in the lounge of a 747, and it was him discussing what UFOs could be. And it's where he brought up the meta-terrestrial hypothesis. And so he gave the chapter to me and all members of the family and some of his colleagues and said, should I include this in the book? And the general consensus was no, because it's your speculation. It's not part of the scientific inquiry. So he didn't. But, he thought that the UFOs, there were sort of three possibilities that people were thinking of in those days. And, one was nuts and bolts hardware coming, from far away, but which he just ruled out because it would require incredible amounts of energy. And the other was time machine, which he also just ruled out because,
Not with me.
but couldn't be, and which sort of then left the notion that it was meta-terrestrial, which basically means coming from some unseen place, like under the ocean or another dimension, which he really thought it most likely was. And this book really sort of made him quite popular. And thank you, Paul.
Do you know this movie? This is the original title for a movie that you probably do know. Never gets old. So, Close Encounters was one of the few movies that deals with aliens that's not super hostile. Okay, there's some kidnapping, but it's kinder and gentler. Most movies that deal with aliens are dystopian and they're coming to kill us. War of the Worlds. This movie was great because it really portrayed aliens in a different way, as curious and sort of friendly. Spielberg had read our father's book and wanted to do a movie about UFOs. So he called our father, started talking with him, and asked him if he could call the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Now imagine what's going on in Studio Land at the same time. There's this new science fiction space opera movie with perhaps the best title of any movie, Star Wars, right? It fits on things. Now you're Spielberg, who is not that established at the time. He's done Duel and Jaws, and he's trying to convince Columbia Studios, for whom my brother Joel made the logo, the animated logo with the woman holding the torch. Joel made that. Yeah, and there's more coming about all the crazy cool stuff he's done. So Spielberg's trying to convince the executives who hearing talk about Star Wars to name a movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which won't fit on any merchandise, and which has to be explained in the trailer. And I gotta think in marketing it's not great if you have to explain the name of a movie, but he got it done. And so our father was a consultant and had a cameo in the movie. He was really nervous because usually when Hollywood treats a subject, it's not with sort of a balanced portrayal and showing these kind of nuances. But he was very happy with how it came out. So here he is. Now, again, he has that look kind of like the Wilbur Check Day Parade. And he's got, and look at that trailer. Super fancy. No expense spared, right? And this is a little from his cameo. 6.1 seconds for those counting at home. Now, in one version, they actually filmed this where he's there with the mothership and everybody else runs away. And he's there kind of communicating with the aliens, and they take his glasses. It just didn't play well. So they have the other ending. And I met Spielberg during filming. My mom had asked me a couple weeks before, hey, the director will be coming through town at O'Hare Airport. Would you like to meet him, Paul? I said, sure. Then the day comes. He says, okay, you and your dad are going to meet him. And I'm saying, I don't want to go. It's like 45 minutes. And my mom said, you said you're going, you are going, young man. So I met Steven Spielberg under duress. And then, we'll do the Oscar thing. Okay. So then, here he is on stage with Julia Phillips, the producer, and Steven Spielberg, the director. And here's a little clip, we'll play a little bit of this, of Spielberg talking about our dad.
Yeah, I was very influenced by J. Allen Hynek because he was not looking at UFOs as science fiction, but he was looking at them as science speculation.
And he was employed by the government for Project Blue Book for 20 years, investigating all of these UFO things that were so big in the 50s.
In a nutshell, Hynek was a disbeliever who became a believer.
He found the witness reports very credible, and he found so many similarities from so many portions of America as well as throughout the world that he became a convert to the fact that the government was hiding something and something was afoot.
At the end of it, the government disbanded Project Blue Book and said no evidence of any kind, of any sort. And Dr. Hynek said, who was very much a skeptic and wanted to be a disbeliever because that was the scientific approach, Dr. Hynek said they had several hundred cases of absolutely unexplained UFOs. He didn't say what they were, he wasn't saying they were from outer space, but he said we came across stuff there was no possible way of debunking some of these things. It was unexplainable.
So I met with him and I used him and I picked his brain and he consulted with me. He's even in the movie in a snippet of a scene in the third act. And I owe a lot to his instilling in me a professional's point of view on this kind of field reporting. And he helped me make the movie more credible than it would have been without his existence.
The term Close Encounter of the Third Kind is taken from Dr. Alan J. Hynek's book. He's who created the term Close Encounters.
Well, a close encounter of the first kind is one is close, but nothing really happened.
Close encounter of the first kind is visible contact with a UFO.
Forget the shape and forget how fast it's going. It's something that you just can't explain. Close encounters of the second kind are those which leave a physical trace. Holes in the ground, burn rings, broken tree branches, telephone lines down, animals disturbed, the stopping of car engines. And the close encounters of the third kind are the most interesting of all. Close encounter of the third kind is really when you meet them.
So that launches us into Project Blue Book. Joel and I were asked to be consultants on the show. And we had a conference with our other family members. Should we do this? The show is happening. And we can be part of it or not. And so we decided that we should, because you don't control things. We don't have final approval, but you can influence the show. And it's a function of the relationship you create. And Sean Jablonski, the showrunner, and David O'Leary, the creator, they were both really cool. And I'll give you one example. There's maybe episode 4 in season 1. There, our TV mom. Oh, and by the way, for the record, it's not super creepy at all to have the supervillain from Game of Thrones play your TV father. Wonderful actor, and we'll talk more about him. But, so there's an episode, a scene where our TV mom in the parallel universe is in the hardware store looking to create a bomb, to buy materials to make a bomb shelter, which never happened. And the guy starts mansplaining to her. Well, when hubby comes back from his trip out of town, I'll talk to him. In the episode, TV mom says, no, wifey is building the bomb shelter and you'll give her the materials now. I got calls from 2 family members after that episode saying, that's exactly what Mimi, our mom, would have said. I said, I know, I wrote that line.
Going down just beyond those trees! Come on! This way!
The whole forest smelled like death.
Lord Almighty.
And then saw that thing. As God is my witness, it was not of this world.
We have a situation in West Virginia. family reported seeing something falling from the sky. I'll get down there right away. I need you to meet someone first. Name's Dr. Alan Hynek.
You want me to investigate flying saucers?
I want you to help me prove to the public the truth. They don't exist.
Lori, Will, you can come on out now.
Doctor, tell me what's happening to my babies.
If you believe that you have seen these strange lights in the sky, would you please raise your hand?
My name is Dr. Hynek. We understand that you saw an entity.
The men in hats, and they were scared.
You should be too.
Alan's working on some really strange things. The flying saucers. More than that, I just don't feel safe anymore.
I'm wondering if Professor Hynek will one day be a problem that needs solving.
You think it's possible extraterrestrial life exists?
The probability of us being alone in our universe is 0. You're not under attack.
What the hell was that?
Those things were not planes.
How the hell would you know what types of planes the Russians have or don't have?
The Russians have nothing to do with this.
I am closer than I've ever been.
Need I remind you of our purpose here?
Flying saucers don't exist.
How do you explain the damage? What type of UFO could do that?
I'm sorry, UFO what?
They're watching us.
Hey! There's something more going on here. I want to know what it is.
I said close the case.
What the hell do you expect?
I expected to discover the truth.
Logic can't begin to explain what we're dealing with here.
One of the things that the program Project Blue Book points out are the men in black, and there really were the men in black. I remember a couple times going into the living room, and there'd be a group, my dad and Bill Powers and a number of other colleagues, and they're talking about how they're very frustrated because they'll get to a UFO report scene location, and people there will say, "Oh, the men in black were here, and they took away the photographs, or they took away the physical object." Yeah, so they really were there.
And this gets to the point that we have a tendency to think of the U.S. government as one monolithic block acting in cohesion. Nothing could be further from the truth. There are warring fiefdoms. Project Blue Book, as I think you all know, was not a serious scientific effort to get to the bottom of the phenomena. It was a PR exercise to tamp down public hysteria. And I think it's altogether likely the men in black were from the Air Intelligence Service Squadron, which had the responsibility to respond to any crash site and contain fallout, both debris and informational. And they had Russian speakers. So that to me seems like a likely place.
Okay. So this is at the celebration, the premiere of Project Blue Book. And Aiden there is wearing a tie that belonged to our dad that he was very happy to wear.
You gave away the tease there.
Oh, sorry.
And you know him as the always scheming Littlefinger on Game of Thrones. But now he is starring as a college professor who investigates UFO sightings in the new drama Project Blue Book. Welcome to the show, man.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you to be here.
Blue Book. This is so interesting. It's based on real cases in the 50s and 60s of UFO sightings, investigation by your character. It's
anything I'd ever seen. And every time I tried to catch up, it would just disappear until it attacked me. I was fighting for my life.
So you're saying this, whatever it was attacking you?
Now, you played Dr. J. Allen Hynek, and he led those investigations in the 50s and 60s. So what can you tell us about him?
Well, yeah, the show is centered around the emergence of the UFO phenomenon in the early 50s, the hysteria and wonder that inspired in people, the U.S. government's reaction to that and their investigation into it. They brought in this astrophysicist called Alan Hynek, who was a college professor, to, explain away, quell people's fears. you know, originally he came in as a skeptic, and his arc is he went from being a skeptic to, you know, one of the leading proponents of the UFO movement, because through his research he just found it just wasn't as simple as that. It just wasn't simple to just rubber stamp all these cases and sign them into a, you know, the outbox as solved, because a lot of them weren't. Very interesting guy. He wrote several books, one of which in particular inspired Spielberg to make the film Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Yeah.
And some of the cases he investigated were used as templates for stories within Close Encounters of the Third Kind. So, you know, X-Files in the time of Mad Men, yes, but also I would think Close Encounters in the 1950s would be a quite appropriate connection to make as well.
And this is also a very stylish show, and you're actually wearing one of his ties.
Yeah, okay. So this is the first time I've worn this, but I reached out to a couple of Hynek's kids, Paul and Joel. You know, I always reckoned that he must have been a great guy to have as a dad, but I wanted to know. And so who better to be in touch with than his sons? And they were very gracious, very helpful, shared some great things with me, including this tie, which is a tie he wore in the 1950s.
Well, it looks good on you.
Yeah.
How about that? And this show looks great. It's going to challenge if you believe or not. And it is Project Blue Book. It premieres Tuesday, January 8th on the History Channel. Make sure you check it out.
Project Blue Book was not supposed to be accurate. Its goal was to be authentic. And so from a family point of view, there's a whole spectrum of what we felt, but largely we liked the show because it was respectful to our parents. Now, yes, there was a lesbian Russian spy chasing after my mom, but you should have seen what happened in real life. Kidding, sorry, Mom. But the show was respectful. It showed our parents as Morris and Aidan, who played our father, and Laura Manel, who played our mom, talked to us quite a lot, to Joel and I and our sister, to try to understand their emotional core so they could understand how they would have responded in sort of exaggerated circumstances like this. So they're very respectful, and everybody involved with the show really loves, well, I don't know if you can love the phenomena, I was fascinated by the phenomena. So
I could add that Aidan was particularly wanted to get it right. And I remember him calling up and saying, "So how would your dad pronounce Halley's Comet? Would it be Halley's or Halley's?" And because in Chicago it was Halley's, but in California it was Halley's. So I let him just go with whatever he thought at that point.
It was great. At one point, I was having dinner with Laura, who was our TV mom, and she said, "You know, it's really cool that your mom in the 60s helped black families buy houses." Now, our mom was the president of the Cook County League of Women Voters. She helped integrate the Chicago public school system. And she was passionate about human rights. But I didn't know this about her helping black families buy houses by posing as sort of the front man. And she said, "It's so cool when you told me that." I said, "Yeah, that doesn't surprise me, Laura, but I didn't tell you that. Where did you hear that?" And it brings up something I think a lot of us have heard things about our parents, not from our parents. Right? They don't often start conversations. "Did I ever tell you the time I helped families buy houses?" And it's from other people that you hear so much good things about your parents.
Paul, I happen to be the one that told her that.
Okay.
And because I saw it firsthand. And
what did you see?
Well, there were some black families would come over to the house, and Mom would take them to go look at, some real estate. So yeah.
And our mom was so cool. So, people ask what it was like growing up. Our dad was gone so much of the time. He was traveling around the world. Our mom was fiercely independent, physically strong, knew how to use tools much better than our dad, and would do everything around the house. And I remember there was an argument when they moved to Chicago, and my brother Ross and I, soon to be born, go to school, and our dad said, "Oh, my boys are going to private school." Well, our mom had researched the schools in Evanston, and the public schools were better. And she said, "No, Alan, I've looked at them, they're going to public school." She said, "They're going to private school." We went to public school. Now, when the show started, through Joel, and his industry contacts, we were contacted, and so they hired us to be consultants on the show. And often, consultants on a show, you're just way in the background, and they call you when they have a question. But because we had Hollywood backgrounds, I asked, can we be more integrated? Can we read the pre-production scripts? Come and visit the set. And they said, sure. So we were able to read all the scripts and give input. Again, you don't control, but you can influence. And one of the things that we had to sort of fight against, and this is in all sort of Hollywood portrayals of scientists, is that they're almost like robotic, logic. Our dad was a physicist, not a logician. And because they can't have multiple characters, they would have our dad expounding knowledgeably on deep sea ocean currents or fauna in Kentucky, which he knows nothing about. But by and large, we liked how they portrayed our dad. And I went to the set 3 or 4 times. Had a wonderful time there. They're very welcoming. And this episode was, I think, episode 6 in season 2 of Close Encounters. So I took a couple home videos of while I was there. Here we go.
Break and action.
Joseph! And I want you to see how precise aliens are in hitting their marks on stage. His name was Henry. Okay, so now I'll show you that same scene. And now this is the dailies. They have like monitors on stage and you can see what they're filming. And so this is me filming that. And there's a part in here where I really felt he was like our father. And you can hear me kind of snort when he puts his pipe in the mouth. There it is.
Cut. Cut.
So that day they asked me to do a cameo. And this was really meta, because here I am doing a cameo in a show that I'm a consultant for that's about my father in the episode in which he was a consultant in a movie and had a cameo. So I came up with a backstory. I'm Lance, the cameraman, hard scrabble background from Pacific Northwest, made good and can now function in society. And so here's the end of one of the episodes with my scene as Lance, the cameraman.
Professor, they're just about ready for you.
Okay, thank you. We'll find our way back. Shall we?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Alan, look around. None of this would be here if it weren't for you.
And I wouldn't be here if it weren't for you.
Don't you want to look at the UFO?
No, I've seen those before. Show me something new.
Yeah, I kind of nailed that. So after that, they kept me up there and wouldn't let me down. No. They asked me, and you can see TV Mom right here. Sorry. They asked me to talk to the cast and crew. And I said, look, you guys are doing a great job, because like Close Encounters, like other portrayals of aliens that aren't always negative, you're doing a great job to help people lean more into this important phenomenon. And then that night, Aiden and I went out drinking until 7 in the morning. And we were at a bar first, and this guy is super famous. He's done like 85 billion movies and TV shows. And somebody came up to him at the bar and asked him to do one of the monologues he did in Game of Thrones, which he did flawlessly. Then he's like, okay, let's just go back to my place. Really, really nice guy. And at the premiere party...
Right. Great time. They set up this lovely abduction beam so you could put yourself in there and get photographed. We were all, of course, hoping to be sucked up, but they didn't get that far.
So if a ship lands after the presentation, before dinner, are you going on it?
You bet.
Me too.
Okay.
All right. Now our sister has made us promise not to do that, but don't tell her. So when the show came out, we organized, this is in Chicago, for a publicity screening of the show right before it came out. And so I'm with the cast here and the producer, and at first they said, hey Paul, can you introduce us to a professor at Northwestern to be the moderator for this panel? And I said, well, that's a fantastically horrible idea, because Northwestern hated this work. So why don't you go to Mark Rodiger, the head of the Center for UFO Studies? He's busy. Go to Mark Chesney, who's also integrally involved. He's busy. So they asked me to moderate. So this was a really resonant moment for me, because I'd done public speaking. I'd never spoken about UFOs, and this is in my hometown. And I had friends of mine, and there were some former students of Dad in the audience who had him as an astronomy professor. And it was such a wonderful experience. And so I also organized some screenings in Chicago, so you could see Joel and I, Michael Malarkey from the show, who plays like an amalgamation of all the Air Force directors. And fun fact, Michael Malarkey was born 10 minutes from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Then there's the creator, and then one of the network executives. So we had a bunch of these screenings, and it was super fun. Then I MC a high-tech film festival, and had the cast and some of the producers come and do a panel there. But this is dwarfed by Big Brother's Hollywood cred.
Good evening. In the Hollywood dictionary, there is no such word as impossible. If a writer's mind can conceive anything, it can be realized by the wizards who produced the movie's visual effects. The three films nominated by their peers for Best Achievement in Visual Effects are: in Armageddon, nominees Richard R. Hoover, Pat McClung, and John Fraser combined computer graphics with a high-speed explosion to simulate the destruction of Paris when a fictitious asteroid hits Earth. Rick Becker, Hoyt Yateman, Alan Hall, and Jim Mitchell, who used millions of digital hairs to bring a 15-foot ape to life in Mighty Joe Young. When skillfully blended with live action, the computer-generated Joe has figured out one solution to annoying car alarms. Joel Hynek, Nicholas Brooks, Stuart Robertson, and Kevin Mack conceived and created a visual afterlife in What Dreams May Come. The artisans utilized over 250,000 individual elements of computer graphics to transform them into an oil painting in motion. And the Oscar goes to Joel Hynek, Nicholas Brooks, Stuart Robertson, Kevin Mack for What Dreams May Come.
Joel Hynek previously received a Scientific and Engineering Award and was nominated for his work on Predator. This is the first Oscar for Nicholas Brooks, Stuart Robertson, and Kevin Mack.
Woo! What dreams have come. We'd like to thank Vincent Ward for his amazing vision, Stephen Simon, Barnett Bain for their faith, Ellen Summers, Eugenio Zanetti, all the folks at Interscope, and I'd like to thank my colleagues at Max Entertainment and my wife Robin and kids and Nick. And Cruelty Free.
Okay, cool. Thank you. I was incredibly nervous going up there. And my wife said, Joel, you have to build something in case you win to calm you down, which is why I went, whoof, in the beginning of it. But what really calmed me down actually was I looked down and I saw Steven Spielberg sitting in the front row right there, big smile beaming up at me, and this made me feel okay. And later, at a Visual Effects Society award ceremony where we were awarding him an award, I went up to him, and because I always wanted to know if he actually knew that Jay Allen was my father. And so I went up to him and said, hey, Stephen, did you know at the Academy Awards that I was the son of Jay Allen Hynek? He said, you bet I did. And anyway, that was closure, made me feel great.
I insisted on putting that in here because a brother can flex about his big brother. Okay, so, and Joel comes to my class at Pepperdine. Now, I teach a class in overall business and crypto, and sometimes the kids are too cool for school. But not when Joel comes to class with his Oscar. They all want selfies. Now, I also asked Joel to put this in here. This is a demo reel of some of the many, many, many movies he's worked on. And I want to say, he won the Oscar for What Dreams May Come. But right before that, he was working on The Matrix. And he created what I think is the most iconic visual effect in all of cinema history, bullet time in The Matrix. He sorted that out, and his company said, hey, look, we got this other project, could you work on that? So he did. His assistant, and that's all I'll say about him, won the Oscar for visual effects on The Matrix, largely in part for the work that Joel did. But then he won the Oscar for the other movie. So here's Joel's demo reel.
Thank you. Thank you.
He's the man.
Whoops.
So, many of you know James Fox, right? And he was at Contact in the Desert last week. Great guy. And James told me some stuff about Socorro that I didn't know. So here's some images done by Michael Schratt, one of the heroes of the phenomena, who brings dusty typewritten case reports to life with these illustrations. So here's Socorro, and here's something. So this is Ray Stanford, and this is my father's handwriting. And so here is what my father said was on that ship in his own writing. So it's kind of like the unofficial Hynek family crest now. And I went to Socorro and San Antonio, New Mexico, with Jacques and Paula Harris. And while I was there, Jacques told me that it was the Socorro case, Lonnie Zamora, who, by the way, I heard from a family member, made a really good chili. Now, Lonnie Zamora, you know, it's a case that my dad felt very comfortable with, and that Jacques said made our father finally feel comfortable speaking in public about aliens and not just crafts. Now, here we are, and I've sort of blurred out the ground in front there, because Jacques had been over on the right there, and I was here, and I saw something, because we were looking for the landing site of that egg-shaped craft in Socorro. And I saw something with my keen powers of discernment on the ground there that I thought might make this the actual site. So I said, Jacques, come over here. The ground is talking to me. I'm an earth whisperer. Come take a look. And Jacques came over. I'm going to unblur it. And it's kind of like a Where's Waldo thing that you might have to like unfocus and focus your eyes, so you might not see it right away. But if you do, just give it a hoot and holler. Okay, right. So I brought Jacques. Hey, Jacques, this is kind of funny. But it turns out Larry Lemke, a friend of ours from JPL, thinks that may have been the site. Right? So for me, it's kind of hallowed ground to go there. Because this is one of these names and these cases I've heard about my whole life. And to actually go there with Jacques was a really wonderful moment. It's not easy to communicate with aliens. Okay? Now, this is something that Joel and I are interested in building upon the legacy of our father with Close Encounters, which describe the nature of cases, but not the evidence. So this is something we're working on, but it's difficult. How many of you have either personally experienced or know friends who say that they've had interactions with aliens who were lying? That is super creepy, right? So, yeah, if biological beings are being sent from Alpha Centauri, etc., are they sending the A-team? No, they're sending the gray team, right? And what exactly are these guys? You know, we don't have answers. And there's another great phrase I've heard that I trust those who are seeking, but I'm skeptical of those who have found. So here's our father extemporaneously talking about his ideas on sort of the heart of the phenomena.
Would like you to just comment on your worldview or your view of the interpretation of the UFO phenomenon, which was prevalent in the old days, that it was an extraterrestrial investigation of Mother Earth from outside this planet, directed and elusive, but still sort of a purposeful investigation. The ET hypothesis, you may call it. Would you make some comments on where we stand today relative to that relative?
Yeah, I'd like to just start from the history of science standpoint, that any culture will tend to interpret any new phenomenon in terms of its own technology. Had this all occurred in Middle Ages, it would have been given a totally different interpretation, of a religious interpretation.
Which it was.
Which it wasn't at that time. We've entered the space age, therefore it is very logical for a new phenomenon of this sort to be interpreted in terms of our own advanced technology. It's also complicated by the fact that astronomy has arrived at the point, we know enough now about the evolution of stars, to make it extremely likely that there are many other intelligences in the universe. But there, I think we have to follow Arthur C. Clarke in pointing out that we take perhaps a much too narrow view of what intelligence in the universe may be. We live on a water planet. It's very logical, therefore, that our bodies are mostly water. It could be that our consciousness expresses itself through protoplasm and through our particular chemistry. There are bits of information today indicating that, now, for instance, George Wald at Harvard feels that consciousness is the most important factor, and that consciousness can exist in many forms. We are one of those forms. So, as somebody said, the whole question of this trying to communicate with life elsewhere is like the not yet born talking to the long since dead, because it takes so long for anything to get. Furthermore, an advanced civilization might regard radio as we regard jungle drums or smoke signals. They may long since have passed the radio stage of communication. But still, I think it's important that the SETI program continue, because it's an adventure and should be done. And it would be philosophically important to find out that there is some intelligence elsewhere. So, all that my own philosophical feeling about the UFO phenomenon is that when all is said and done, it represents some form of intelligence. But whether that intelligence is from great distances away, or whether it is perhaps much closer to us in a parallel reality or in another dimension, or whether it is in some strange way a product of our own intelligence, our own psyche, I don't know. This is the research problem. That it seems to be programmed, that it seems to have an intelligence of its own, I think is unmistakable. If anyone who studies the subject just sees that. But we must not jump to the conclusion that because it has an intelligence of its own, it is necessarily visitors from outer space. It may be in some strange way connected with that intelligence, if that intelligence can in some way project itself down here. But, well, that's really all I have to say. That's it.
Good, thank you.
Not so bad.
Har dere noen tilleggsspørsmål til det der?
I found it really interesting there that my dad mentioned projection down here, because I've often thought that maybe that is what it is, because so many reports where the craft seem to be here and then are suddenly here, or make a right angle, going along and make a right angle turn, very similar to when you have a light beam or something from a projector and you're projecting it on an uneven surface. It'll move slowly and then suddenly very fast. And I don't know, it could be like some mechanism of projection from some faraway place. One thing I wanted to mention was when I was about 15, I was driving with my dad up to Canada, and this sort of speaks to how life growing up with him was both exciting and frustrating, because I know he felt frustration too. I'm looking at my dad, and he's messing up with his hair. He's driving, and he's all fidgety. And I say, "Dad, what's going on?" And he says, "Well, there's this guy, James McDonald, who wants me to come clean, wants me to, speak out and say what's really going on." And yet, he had Northwestern University that wanted nothing to do with UFOs and refused to even let him use Northwestern stationery, which he did anyway. But and then there was the Air Force, of course, which is also saying, no, don't go into that. You just got to identify stuff. And so it sort of drove home to me the way he had to sit on the fence, basically, and was very frustrated by that. And of course, eventually he was able, after leaving Project Blue Book, he was able to come clean and say what he wanted. Yeah, that was life with Dad.
My parents asked me when I was graduating from college to go to St. Louis. This is 1985, because my father they discovered a brain tumor. So he was going to be operated on in St. Louis, and we're moving to Scottsdale. And they asked me to go to St. Louis and then drive the car from St. Louis to Scottsdale so that they could fly, of course. And I remember driving down from Flagstaff through this unincorporated village, Sedona, in 1985. I'd never heard of it before. I had no idea of the varied topography of Arizona. I didn't know that like Flagstaff was like the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And I'm driving through Sedona. I remember driving by Bell Rock and just feeling the energy from that without having been told. And just thinking this is the most incredible place I've ever seen. And get to Arizona. And unfortunately, it was the decline for our father. And I remember a few days before he passed, 4 or 5 days before he passed, a lovely memory. My mom asked me to go to the store to get some groceries. I came back, and they're lying on top of the bed holding hands, listening to Eine kleine Nachtmusik by Mozart. Our father was a big fan of classical music, and that was such a bright spot in very gloomy times. A few days later, at this point he's unresponsive. He's lying on a sort of a hospital gurney bed in the master bedroom. And I mentioned I was a French major. When I told my dad that many years before, he said, "But what kind of job are you going to get?" I said, "Dad, I'm not going to college like vocational school. I'm learning how to communicate, read the classics." He said, "But what kind of job are you going to get?" So fast forward, there's my dad. He's unresponsive. I'm holding his hand. I'm just talking with him. I think many of us have done this kind of thing. And I say, "Hey, Dad, I know there's something you want to get off your chest, and I want to help." You know, Joel, Academy Award winner. Our brother Ross, wonderful engineer, Abbott Labs, helped develop some of the COVID test machines. Our sister, a nurse midwife who gave birth to thousands of babies and was talked about in the Boston newspapers for things she did, and a wonderful artist. Our oldest brother Scott, PhD from MIT. I said, "Dad, I know that my 3 brothers, being engineers, poor man's physicists, sullied the family name." Get up. And then me, being a French major, restored honor to the Hynek family name. His hand squeezed my hand because he couldn't help it. It's the last communication I had with our father. He passed away soon thereafter. And yes, when he was born, they took him on the roof of the hospital to show him Halley's Comet. And right before he died, I took him out in the desert here in Arizona to see Halley's Comet. Something he had told Joel would bookend his life. And it's never easy when a loved one passes, but when you have these kind of cosmological bookends, it makes it easier. So when our father passed, per his wishes, Joel and I and our other siblings, at the lake in Canada, which is so special to him, we went out in the middle of the lake and spread his ashes. We looked up and we saw a rainbow. And thought, that's lovely. 10 years later, same thing with my mom. The 5 of us kids get in the boat. Now there's some grandkids, including some of Joel's, back in the cabin. We go out in the boat, same somber mission. Spread my mom's ashes. And we look up, and again, we see a rainbow. A minute later, we look up, we see a double rainbow. You know, ascribe what meaning to that you will, but it was a beautiful moment for us. We get back to the cabin. One of Joel's daughters runs up to us and says, "Hey, everybody, while you were gone, I found this drawing I did of Mimi, our mom, years ago. It's Mimi and a rainbow." So people ask us a lot what it's like to grow up, and they see the front face, the official face, the UFO guy. But he was, to us, little Joey from Chicago, who had an over-fondness for puns. Is that fair?
Oh, yes.
And he was a wonderful man, warm, caring, and really helped us appreciate the mysteries and beauty of the universe, and in particular, UFOs. Thank you.
Well said, well said.
I think, I know we have to be out of here by 3, so there's time for questions, yes? Okay. We do what Stacy says.
Joel and Paul, what was the name of the lake in Ontario? I may have been on it.
Lake Duborne. But
Duborne?
it had 2 names. It was Lake of the Mountains or Lake Duborne.
I've been to Big Hawk Lake. I was a member of the Stratford Festival, so we used to go up in Ontario for years.
And to orient it a bit more, it's about halfway between Sault Ste. Marie and Sudbury on Kings Highway 17, right at the north shore of Lake Huron.
Gotcha. Thank you.
I had 2 questions. One is, I watched Project Blue Book on the History Channel. I just absolutely was enthralled by it. The parts of it that were fictional, did they come across to you as things that could have actually happened, even though they weren't, didn't actually happen? And the other question is, have either of you had any close encounters or unusual sightings of your own?
Yes, some of the things in Project Blue Book I thought could have happened, but didn't know actually if they did. There were some things that rankled me, like the Dr. Von Braun coming up with the teleportation thing. But in general, I thought, as Paul mentioned, they were authentic, but not necessarily accurate. My mom certainly could have built the bomb shelter in the backyard. Definitely could have done that. And there could have been, people tapping the phone line other than me. I don't know. But yeah, that's about all I can say about that. Yes.
Did you have your own UFO?
Oh, right. Thank you. I did not. I always wished that I did. There was just one time up at the cabin when there was some bright light that we saw going south to north. My dad and I were looking at this thing and we thought, what the heck is that? But, probably it was just a jet. We rarely ever saw jets there at all. But this was fairly low and screaming fast, so didn't really qualify as a UFO.
And Joel, all 3 of my brothers have been pilots. And Joel used to take us in our mentally adventurous days, recreationally adventurous days, up in the plane and do a stall and go into have a 0G dive.
These crazy lunatics, it was a 6-seater, and it wasn't a stall, it was a controlled dive. And you'd become weightless for about 15 seconds. And I would always say, okay, everybody loosen up your seatbelt because, you want to feel it. But these jokers, Paul and Ross, would just completely take off their seatbelts. And so while we're doing this dive and looking straight down, these guys come floating up into the cockpit. And yeah, it's just, typical.
Best big brother in the friggin' world.
All right. Thank you guys for giving a great presentation. You touched on a little bit at the end, but I just wanted to talk a little bit more about your father's relationship with James E. McDonald. And I know they testified to Congress together, and from what I heard, they had quite a contentious kind of first interaction when James E. McDonald kind of broke into your father's office. And can you say anything about that?
Oh, I was not aware of that, no, but I guess that was the beginning of the dialogue or a relationship between them, and can certainly see why it would have frustrated him.
And Joel talked a little bit about it, but it's very interesting. I think our father felt there were 3 sort of constituencies that he had to be mindful of. the Air Force and the government, mainstream science, and let's say believers. Try to think of three more difficult or different groups in the world. I mean, those Venn diagram circles aren't touching at all. And I think he felt he had to keep each of these groups mildly displeased to do that delicate balancing act. And he had great respect for James McDonald. They did have contentious encounters, and James would say, "You're a sellout, why are you doing this?" But he felt that he had a seat at the table. And like us as consultants on the show, he could influence things. He could not control them. Project Blue Book, like a lot of organs of the government, had this powerful institutional imperative to stamp solved on all the cases. If you've ever looked at any of the Project Blue Book case forms, you have to go through all these things about likely, probable, definite balloon, and these other things to get to unidentified. And as they showed in the trailer for Project Blue Book, they investigated 12,000 odd cases, right? And they still, even only taking cases they thought they could explain, still couldn't explain about 5%, about 700 cases. And that's a percentage that kind of holds, that 5%. So he felt that it was important to have access. And when he left, he then started publishing works and talking about that. So, but put yourself in the shoes. I don't know if there's a right answer of what to do. Do you quit in a huff and have a press conference and say, "I'll not have my integrity sullied and this is a sham"? Or do you try to influence from within? I don't know if there's a right answer, but that's what he chose.
Okay. I have overwhelming gratitude for what you came forward with and sharing your family's experience. And I've always known about your father, but you just brought him to us right now. He's right here. But what I wanted to say, the question I have is, did he ever give you any information on how we would communicate when these beings do make contact other than ESP or mind thought?
No, he never gave us any secrets. No secrets.
Don't want to hear that, huh? I understand. Thank you so much. I appreciate your family.
He didn't specify how he would communicate, but he definitely thought there was a psychic element to it, that there would be communication that way.
And another thing, our father wasn't a completely atheist scientist. He had Rosicrucian leanings. He was very interested in theosophy and Rudolf Steiner. And I think he felt one of his missions was to take a flashlight to the dim edges of mainstream acceptance of science and bring us all a little bit farther along. And yes, he would have loved that archetypal landing of the flying saucer on the White House lawn, that capital D disclosure with a Walter Cronkite type narrating it. Those days are gone. The disclosure is not what it used to be, right? He didn't get that. But I think he did make a lot of us feel more comfortable leaning into this phenomenon, even if we don't have the answers.
Yes. Certainly the thing that motivated him, I think, aside from what Paul just mentioned, was the notion that UFOs might be a whole new aspect of physics, of course, that would, when we finally learn what UFOs are, would likely shake the foundations of physics, or at least open a whole new area of physics that we knew nothing about, similar to, say, nuclear physics would have appeared to people back in the 19th century. Yeah.
I think we have to get out now.
Looks like it.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.